Hey, good morning to everybody. Happy 4th of July Eve. It's Daryl here, aka Artist in Recovery. And I want to do a video that I've pretty much done every year here on YouTube. And because this is the anniversary. This is the 19th anniversary of this day. It happened on this day exactly 19 years ago. And it was pretty much rock bottom for me. And like I said, pretty much at this time of year, on the 3rd or 4th, I do this video. This video, though, because my channel's monetized, a lot of times I got to be very careful when I talk about substances or prices or things I used to do. Even though the point of my channel and the point of this video is to stress the fact that recovery is possible. You know, I do not condone or glorify the use of drugs in any way, shape, or form. The point of this video is to stress that recovery is possible. I have been completely clean and sober since October 23rd of 2006. All right, so this happened on the 3rd of July, 2006. I used maybe a few more times before I got clean for good on October 23rd. And I want to tell you what happened on this day, and it's not something I'm proud of. It involves a crossdresser, a baseball bat, cops, prescriptions, rock. That's all I'm going to say for the substances, like I said, because I'd like this to be able to be monetized, so I think you know what I'm talking about. I had a friend from high school, and he lived in the same town as I did. He wasn't like a friend. I knew him from high school, and I guess he had gotten in an accident on an ATV years ago, and he received disability. He received a disability check on the 3rd. This is something, you know, that got around. He was another person that used in my town. You know, and occasionally, you know, the addicts would get together, you know, we'd run into each other. And I knew that he got a big disability check on the 3rd, and he also got a lot of prescriptions on the 3rd for like head injuries he had. And I won't mention any specifics of the prescriptions, but you could pretty much anti-anxiety stuff and heavy-duty pain stuff, okay? And like I said, I'm not proud of this, but this is what addicts do. Like back when I was using, if I knew, like if one of my friends got clean, like good friends from high school, you know, and he got clean and he moved in with a girl, got a job and everything, we would try to talk him into going out because we knew would be able to save money up. It's a really scumbag thing to do, but that's what you do when you're an addict. You know, we try to, hey, come on out, get away from the ball and chain, come out and party. You know, and then once he got out, we would try to get him to spend every cent of his money. That's just the nature of the addiction, of the disease. And you use people, you do. And I got, you know, my addiction got to the point where I used alone pretty much all the time. You know, it wasn't partying anymore. It was just using to be able to function. And, you know, my tolerance was high. I used a lot. And, okay, so this guy, I knew that he needed a place to live, but I also knew the 3rd of the month was coming up, and I had a 2-bedroom apartment. I had it was a 1-bedroom with a spare room, and he kept asking me, "Hey, dude, how about, you know, let me stay over there, man? I need a place to crash." And I kept saying, "Well, maybe, let me think about it." But then I started to get this idea in my head, you know, I'll have him over just before he gets his loot and his prescriptions, which I did on the 3rd of July, 2006. You know, and he had I remember that morning, this morning, 19 years ago, this exact morning, same weather, same everything. I still remember it. And I drove him around to the bank to cash his check. I drove him around to the pharmacy, Rite Aid Pharmacy, to get his prescriptions. I still remember this crystal clear, 19 years ago to this day. You know, and then we just started slamming it, partying hardcore, and into the night. And I had heard this about this guy, that when he used, he wasn't part of the LGBTQ community, but it was a thing, a quirk, I guess you'd call it. When he used, he would dress up like a woman. He would cross-dress. If you're familiar with drugs, this has, guys do this. Guys, because it affects the same part of your brain as sex and drugs affect the same part of your brain. A lot of times it affects people, and it gives them a very strong drive, and they do things they wouldn't usually do. I won't get too much more into that, but I had heard that he would cross-dress. So that day we're back at my place. He's got a garbage bag full of his belongings, put it in the spare bedroom, and we're using. And he comes downstairs and he's wearing women's clothes. We're wearing like, I don't know what they're called, capri pants. And he just looked ridiculous to me. He had sideburns, stubble, and he was wearing a woman's blouse, makeup. But I wanted to use him for everything he had, so I just looked the other way. I don't have a problem with the LGBTQ community, but this was a very bizarre situation. So into the night, we keep partying. 19 years ago this night, and it's about 3 a.m, and we can't get a hold of his guy. So we call my guy, and he's supposed to meet us on a back road by a junkyard, 3 a.m. And this guy goes with me, and he's dressed like a woman. I was like, dude, aren't you going to change before we go? And he, no, don't worry about it. So I'm driving around with this guy dressed as a woman, going to hook up at 3 a.m. We're parked next to a junkyard. We're there for hours, and not hours, I'd say maybe 90 minutes, and the dealer isn't showing. And I'm just sweating. I'm thinking, the cops are going to pull up any minute because we're right near a junkyard. They patrol there. And what am I going to say? I'm tweaked, my jaw, I'm going, and this guy's in my passenger seat with makeup on, and, I just picture my name being in the paper, and, it's the hometown I went to high school in. We ended up leaving, thank God. I just said, I can't sit here anymore. Even if it was, you do anything for drugs at that point, but I just couldn't sit there anymore. So it's 7 a.m. now, on the 4th of July, 19 years ago. And I finally get a hold of my guy. He's in the projects. 4th of July morning. I drive up there. I still remember, it was so bizarre. We'd been up all night. We were all messed up. My jaw's going. And everybody's, the people in these apartment buildings are coming out, getting their barbecues together. You see families packing up to go to the beach for the day. And here I am, going to hook up. And it was just... It's one of those times where I just felt so disconnected from reality. And I hook up with a big chunk. Go back to my place. Like I said, it was a day just like today. And we're inside. We got all the windows drawn. He starts that thing that people are looking in the windows. So he starts putting blankets over the windows. All right, still dressed as a woman. We're sweating. I'm sitting on the floor sweating. The house is a mess. There's burn holes in the carpet. Porn magazines all over the place. And call for his guy now. Come back again. Hook us up again. And the guy's on the way over. And once again, he's still dressed as a woman. And the guy pulls up in an Infiniti, big shot dealer, black guy. And I see him coming to the door, and I'm like, dude, you're still dressed as a woman, And he's like, don't worry about it. My buddy knows, he's cool with it. I was like, all right. He comes in. We keep going. Smoking. And I remember peeking out the windows, and it was such a beautiful day outside. And we were just locked inside this dark, dank, disgusting apartment, filled with smoke, and it stank. And it was all blacked out from blankets all over the windows. This guy's dressed as a woman. I got the black guy dealer over here. And it was just so bizarre. And at that point, I knew he was running out of money already. We'd gone through that much. And I had had enough. So I got this idea in my head that I said, I forgot. My parents are coming over today. It's the 4th of July. They come over every 4th of July. You got to get out of here. I said, I tell you what, I'm going to drive you about 4 or 5 miles away to a state park. I know this spot. There's like a cave. Nobody goes there. I said, I'll drive you out there, just hang out for a little while, maybe an hour, 45 minutes. I'll come back and pick you up. You can't be here, especially dressed like that. When my parents come over. I said, I'm going to have a hard enough time now. I'm all tweaked up. So he said, all right, you know, and he packs all his stuff up in his pockets, you know, the supplies he had left and his loot and everything. And I drive him out and I drop him off. The state park's full of people, but I go to like I used to live at the state park. My father was the park ranger there, so I knew where the caves and all, you know. So I found a little hidden spot for him, dropped him off, and I just left him there. I had no intention of ever going back to pick him up. He's dressed as a woman. He's in the middle of a state park. No way to get home. Pockets full of God knows what. And I just left him there. You know, I had enough. I had used him to my heart's content, and now I was done with him. Like I said, I'm not proud of this. All right. I don't remember what happened. I probably went home and scraped and crawled around on the floor looking for crumbs for hours. It was about 9, 10 o'clock that night, and I was trying to fall asleep. I'd been up for days. And I heard a window break. I run downstairs, and it's him. He had made it, somehow he made it all the way out of the park, back all the way across the center of town. How, I don't know, dressed as a woman, pockets full of everything. And he made it back to my place, and he was breaking in. I had put all of his, the bags, the belongings he had left out on the porch, so he wouldn't do that. But he still broke the window. I don't know if he didn't see his bag of belongings, or he just was pissed off, or what, but he broke the window. I grabbed a baseball bat. I ran out the door, front door. Now everybody's out in the street because it's about 9:30 and the town fireworks are going off. And I'm chasing a man dressed as a woman. I'm chasing him down the sidewalk with a baseball bat, screaming, I'm gonna kill you. Don't you ever come back here. That's what I'm screaming. Neighbors are all looking at me. He falls, and I swing and I hit him, and I stopped, and I turned around and went back home. Of course, the police came. This is where it's really weird. The police actually grabbed him, and they thanked me. I didn't know he had a major warrant. So, you know, this guy's trying to tell him, you know, I locked him out of the house and this other stuff, and they don't care. You know, they asked me, does he live here? I said, no. You know, he's just, you know, he uses all the time. He tried to break in my house. So they said, thanks, Daryl. He had a warrant. And that made me feel even worse, you know, because, you know, I don't know if getting arrested would have made me feel better, but it didn't make me feel good. And that's it. That was the night. My landlord found out about it. I replaced the window. I moved out of town eventually. I got clean. I got clean, 3-4 months later. Actually, I got clean in a week or two. I put myself into a detox and a rehab a few weeks later. And, you know, I one day here and one day there, I relapsed. I think, you know, I was like one day I went out and relapsed. Another day, like in September, I relapsed. And then October 23rd, 2006, I've been clean and sober since. That's the story. That was the bottom for me. I felt the worst about using this guy. And then I just dumped him out in the woods, you know, with no way to get home, in a very bad position, you know, dressed as a woman, pockets full of all this stuff, you know. It's one of the worst things I've done to another human being, not to mention the baseball bat. I had never talked to him again, except for one time he called me about, I don't know, maybe 6 months, 10 months later, and I was clean. And I told him right off the bat, I said, stop right there, dude. You know, he was like, oh, don't worry, man. I said, he wanted to party. And he says, you know, he said he didn't hold a grudge or anything like that. It's all cool. And, you know, you want to hang out? And I said, no, dude. I said, stop right there. I said, I'm clean and sober. I don't want anything to do with you or that or nothing. You know, nothing personal, but it's over for me. I'm done. And then he goes like this, me too, dude. You didn't let me finish. I'm clean too. You know, this is one of the first times I learned that whenever you tell your buddies they used to use with that you're clean, that's the first thing they say. Me too, I'm clean too. You know, so they can use you, just like I said at the beginning of this video. You know, now I was the clean guy that had to protect myself from getting used, getting tempted. You know, the guys that I used to use with now tempted me to relapse, you know. What comes around goes around. But I never did. it was important that I changed my phone number. I have no contact. I do not hang out with anybody I ever used with. Anybody I ever drank with, anybody I ever used with. I don't care if they were best friends or whatever. They're out of my life. This is something that I owe my recovery to. You know, you can't, me personally, I can't hang out with people that I used with. You know, it's not because they're bad people, but they are triggers for me. So, I mean, there's a girl that wanted to, she's in recovery now. I used to live with her. I used to use with her. But, you know, she pursued me for a long time. She's actually a counselor now. And I told her, I said, I can't do it. I cannot, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to you on the phone. You know, it's done. The relationship's done. And I haven't talked to her in years. Like I said, and it's not because she's a bad person. It's because just her voice, her laugh, her eyes is a trigger for me. You know, one of those times that I relapsed right after the 4th of July was because of that. I was hanging out with a guy who was clean, and I remember he laughed, and that laugh it triggered me. It triggered me to use. I was like, oh, that was such a good time. I want to go back to that good time. I can't hang with people anybody I ever used or drank with. They are permanently out of my life, and it's working for me. Recovery is possible. That was the worst day of my life. That was rock bottom for me 19 years ago on this day. Recovery is possible. These last 19 years have been better than I could have ever imagined. I can honestly say I wake up happy every day. The worst day that I have now is better than the best day that I had when I was using. And I swear in the Bible by 100 times. Life is good. Recovery is possible. Have a good and safe 4th of July.